Lewis Hamilton made his Formula One debut in 2007 as teammate of defending double world champion Fernando Alonso, who had joined McLaren after leaving Renault at the end of 2006, where he won 2 world titles. On his debut at the Australian Grand Prix, Hamilton finished third, becoming the 13th driver to finish on the podium on his debut. He finished second in the next 4 rounds: Malaysia, Bahrain, Spain and Monte Carlo. After finishing second behind Alonso at Monaco, Hamilton suggested he was prevented from racing his teammate, as tensions were building between the 2 McLaren drivers. Hamilton achieved both his first pole position and first victory of his Formula One career in the Canadian Grand Prix. A week later he won the United States Grand Prix, becoming the first Briton since John Watson in 1983 to win a Formula One race on US soil. In his first home Grand Prix at Silverstone, he finished third, to equal Jim Clark's 1963 record of 9 consecutive podium finishes for a British driver. But this run came to an end at the European Grand Prix, where during qualifying Hamilton crashed at the Schumacher chicane after a problem with the wheel nut. He went on to finish out of the points in 9, and his championship was reduced to only 2 points ahead of Alonso. Hamilton won the Hungarian Grand Prix from pole, following a controversial qualifying session, in which his teammate Alonso, having set the fastest time, was giving a 5-place grid penalty for preventing Hamilton from leaving the pit lane in time to complete his final lap. Hamilton went on the summer break with a 7-point lead ahead of Alonso, 20 points ahead of Raikkonen, with only 6 rounds to go. At the Turkish Grand Prix he suffered a puncture, and despite starting second he finished 5th. Going into Italy, Hamilton had a 5-point lead over teammate Alonso, who took his 4th win of the season, leading home the 4th one to finish of the season for the team, as Hamilton finished second. The podium was completed by Raikkonen. Following Felipe Massa's retirement from the race and with only 4 rounds to go, it was clear that the Ferrari team will back Raikkonen for the remaining of the season. By Belgium, the Ferrari led the Constructors' Championship by 57 points from BMW Sauber, after the exclusion of McLaren from the Constructors' Championship following the Ferrari-McLaren Spygate. On the Sunday, Raikkonen won the race from pole, as Hamilton finished 4th behind Alonso. At the Japanese Grand Prix, Hamilton scored a monumental win, extending his lead in the Drivers' Championship to 12 points over teammate Alonso, who crashed out in the second half of the race. The podium was completed by Heikki Kovalainen and Kimi Raikkonen. 1 week later in China, to clinch the championship, Hamilton needed to finish within 1 point of Alonso and 6 points of Raikkonen. In qualifying, he scored a crucial pole ahead of Raikkonen, with Alonso starting only 4th behind Massa. So all Hamilton needed to do was to finish where he started. From the morning of the race onwards, conditions at the circuit were wet, forcing all drivers to use intermediate tires. After the start of the race, the top 4 remained the same as on the grid, but as the track dried, Hamilton began to suffer from tire wear. With his pit stop imminent, McLaren elected to keep Hamilton out and stick to the original strategy. But this turned out to be a catastrophic choice, because by lap 31 Raikkonen had passed him when he ran wide and took the lead of the race. Hamilton had to come into the pits, but as he entered in the pit lane with his tires worn onto the canvas, he failed to negotiate the sharp left-hander in the pits, pitching his car in the gravel. Despite Marshall's efforts to get him back in the race, he suffered the first retirement of his career. Raikkonen eventually came home to win his 5th race of the season, ahead of Alonso and Massa. Hamilton went on the final race at Brazil with 4 points ahead of teammate Alonso and 7 ahead of Raikkonen, which meant a 3-way fight. In qualifying, Hamilton managed to put his car behind Massa and ahead of Raikkonen, with Alonso right behind him. At the start, the Ferraris were faster, with the Finn passing Hamilton on the outside. At the 3rd corner, Alonso passed Hamilton on the inside, and then on the Rita Oposta, defending himself from the attack of Hamilton, he took the inside line. Hamilton locked up his brake and went off the track while trying to regain the position. He rejoined the race in 8th place, just behind Jarno Trulli. Hamilton was trying very hard to make up for the positions he lost. On lap 2 he passed Trulli and went into 7th, and 4 laps later he passed Nick Heidfeld to take 6th. But just seconds later, he suffered a gearbox problem. On the restart posta he failed to find gears and slowed down, to be passed by most cars on the track. After going slow for about 30 seconds, Hamilton managed to reset the computer of his car and get it going again, but he was in 18th place by that time. With the Ferraris pulling away, he needed at the very least 7th place, but more likely 5th, to clinch the World Championship. After the first round of pit stops, Massa held a 3.3 seconds lead over Raikkonen, followed by Alonso, 17 seconds behind. Hamilton was 13th, 15 seconds behind Massa. The Brazilian made his second pit stop on lap 50, followed by Alonso on lap 52, and Raikkonen 1 lap later. The Finn set record lap times in the process, which meant he rejoined the race in the lead, 2 seconds ahead of Massa. At that point, Raikkonen was the virtual world champion, with Hamilton outside the top 5. On the final laps, the position was pretty much set. Raikkonen and Massa led with a comfortable margin on Alonso. Hamilton gained 7th place when Trulli made a pit stop, but this wasn't enough, as he needed at least 5th place to win the title. At the checkered flag, Raikkonen was first, winning the race and the championship by 1 point ahead of Hamilton. But despite losing the title, Hamilton put his trademark on the sport. With 4 wins, 6 pole positions and 12 podiums, he became the best rookie Formula One has ever seen. Hamilton shrugged up the disappointment of losing the 2007 championship at the final round and started the new season back at the front of the title race. A month after Alonso's departure, it was confirmed that Heikki Kovalainen would drive the second McLaren in 2008 alongside Hamilton, who signed a new 5-year-old multi-million pound contract to stay with the team until 2012. He started on pole at the opening round at Melbourne, where the Ferraris had the worst of it, Massa colliding with Coulthard on lap 27 as he tried to pass the Red Bull driver, but brought out the safety car. After the restart, Raikkonen, trying to pass Kovalainen for 2nd place, braked too late for turn 3 and went off, creeping to the gravel trap and back onto the track, as he was way down the order. But the Ferrari's weekend turned from bad to worse when he dropped back with an engine problem a few laps before the end. With the Ferrari self-destructing, the cards fell in Hamilton's favour that weekend. He took a comfortable win ahead of Nick Heidfeld and Nico Rosberg. It was the best possible start for him. But the next round in Malaysia started with all Ferrari front row, as Felipe Massa started from pole position with Raikkonen alongside. The McLarens of Kovalainen and Hamilton had been expected to line up behind the Ferraris on the 2nd row, but both drivers were given 5-place grid penalties post-qualifying for holding up Nick Heidfeld and Fernando Alonso respectively, dropping them to 89 on the grid. McLaren's penalty robbed us of a 4-way fight to the first corner, as neither of the new occupants of the 2nd row, Jarno Trulli and Robert Kubica, were able to get close to the Ferraris. The big winners of the first corner were Mark Webber and Hamilton, who emerged 4th and 5th. On soft tyres, Hamilton fell back from Webber, the McLaren again suffering, as overnight rain had washed the build-up of rubber of the track. But as the tyres wore down, he began to chase the Red Bull driver, and was half a second of his rear wing when the Australian pitted on lap 17. Released, Hamilton lapped much quicker and was poised to move ahead as his first corner approached on lap 20, thanks also to Webber losing 2 seconds behind Takuma Sato's lap Super Aguri. But Hamilton's first pit stop was ruined by a sticky front right wheel nut, the same corner of the car that caused his crash at the Nürburgring 1 year earlier. He lost around 10 seconds and emerged 12th behind a similarly delayed Webber, who had also lost his rear light and had developed a problem with his ear pump. After Massa pitted on lap 18, Raikkonen unleashed his real pace, and the outcome of this duel by pit stop was never in doubt. Massa compounded the loss of the lead by losing every other place when he spun on the lap 32. Raikkonen won the race ahead of Kubica and Kovalainen, with Hamilton finishing 5th, who retained his championship lead. At the Bahrain Grand Prix, Hamilton qualified 3rd behind Massa and Kubica, but it was Massa who got the better start and passed Kubica to take the lead. Hamilton's poor start caused his anti-stall system to kick in, and he was passed by 6 drivers to fall back to 9th. As Massa extended his lead at the front of the race, Hamilton, who trailed Alonso, collided with the back of the Renault, knocking down McLaren's front wing of the car. Suffering handling difficulties, Hamilton returned to the pit lane for a new wing, but his car clearly suffered other damage, and he made up little ground over the rest of the race. Massa won the race with Raikkonen second, and with Hamilton finishing on 13th place, Kimi took the lead in the Drivers' Championship with 3 points ahead of Nick Heidfeld and 5 points ahead of Hamilton. The Spanish Grand Prix saw Hamilton returning to the podium after 2 days of absence, where he scored the 3rd place behind Massa and Raikkonen, with the Phoenix extending his lead in the Drivers' Championship. At the Turkish Grand Prix, Hamilton qualified 3rd behind his teammate Kovalainen, but he immediately overtook him at the start to claim 2nd behind Massa. Fisichella and Nakajima collided at the first turn, which brought out the safety car. The race got underway on lap 3 with Massa leading from Hamilton. Between lap 4 and lap 11, the two drivers exchanged fastest laps, and the McLaren driver managed to hold the gap between him and the leader at 1.5 seconds, leaving Kubica behind. Hamilton then began to close the gap between himself and Massa, posting consecutive quick lap times, and was within 0.7 of a second by lap 15. Alonso was the first of the leading runners to make a pit stop on lap 15, with Hamilton 1 lap later, while Massa stayed out for another 3 laps. After Raikkonen pitted on lap 21, Massa regained the lead, but with Hamilton just 0.8 of a second behind. Running lighter of fuel, with a view to make an additional pit stop to the Ferrari driver, Hamilton was able to close the gap on Massa, and on lap 24 he overtook him at turn 12. Hamilton now led, with Massa 2nd and Raikkonen 3rd, and he soon broke away from Massa, lapping over a second quicker than the Ferrari driver. Over the next 6 laps, Hamilton stretched his lead to over 6 seconds before pitting on lap 32. He rejoined the race in 3rd, 2.6 seconds behind 2nd place Raikkonen. 8 laps later, after Hamilton's pit stop, Ferrari called Massa in for his final stop of the afternoon. On lap 43, Hamilton led by 14.5 seconds from Massa, with Raikkonen further 7 seconds behind. 2 laps later, he made his 3rd and final pit stop. The McLaren driver rejoined the track behind Massa, but crucially ahead of championship leader Raikkonen. The top 3 will remain this way for the remainder of the race. Rain had threatened all weekend long at the Monaco Grand Prix, but stayed away from qualifying. Felipe Massa has never pretended to like Monaco, and when he took pole ahead of Raikkonen and Hamilton, the general expectation was that he was running a light fuel strategy. But that assumption was never really tested because of the rain that fell on the circuit 20 minutes before the race started. Just before the warm-up lap, Heikki Kovalainen's McLaren stalled due to a software problem, and the Finnish driver were pushed into the pits. But despite the treacherous surface, the field gave good order through the first corner, with Hamilton beating Raikkonen away from the lights to still second. The order in the front remained the same until lap 6, when Hamilton hit the wall at the back. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was enough to deflate his right rear tire. The McLaren leaned back into the pits, where he took on a belt of fuel, and his pit crew resisted the temptation to switch him onto extreme wet tires. Hamilton came back out of the pits in 5th place, with Raikkonen now 2nd, ahead of Kubica and Alonso. A few minutes later, a trio of crashes at Massenet on lap 8 brought out the safety car, which eliminated what had been an impressive 11.5 seconds lead for Massa. It was at this point that the Ferrari's race began to unravel. First of all, Raikkonen was served with a penalty, as his mechanics had not cleared the grid quickly enough before the start of the race. Kubica was putting Massa under pressure, and Massa responded with some faster laps, till he went straight on a Sunday vote. After the first 2 made the pit stops, Hamilton was promoted into the lead and began to pull away from the field. He made his 2nd pit stop on lap 54, 2 laps before Massa, who delayed his switch to dry tires until lap 56, 3 laps later than Kubica, which proved to be a mistake. The BMW driver was quickly up to speed, and when Massa came out of the pits, Kubica was already through into 2nd. But with Hamilton 40 seconds ahead, it looked as though there would be no battle for the lead, until Rosberg crashed heavily on lap 62, causing the 2nd safety car period of the day. Adrian Sutil found himself in a Ferrari sandwich, with Raikkonen behind him, Wasn't even looking to make a move at him at the harbour chicane following the restart when his Ferrari lost control and hit Suttil's car. That was the final act in a dramatic and chaotic race. Hamilton took the checker flag ahead of Massa and Kubica and moved back in the lead in the championship. At the Canadian Grand Prix, where he scored his first pole and race win just 1 year earlier, Hamilton scored a gigantic pole ahead of Kubica and Raikkonen. The opening laps went smoothly, with Hamilton on soft tyres quickly building up a lead over Kubica and Raikkonen, both on hards. He had a 5.5 seconds advantage by lap 12. It was a surprise to see that the first retirement of the race was apparently down to mechanical failure rather than driver error. Adrian Suttil's force index came to a halt between turns 2 and 3, which eventually brought out the safety car. On lap 18, most of the front runners headed for the pits. McLaren seemed to have used the opportunity to give Hamilton a heavier load of fuel. Kubica and Raikkonen both reached the pit lane exit before him. The exit light was red, and Kubica and Raikkonen pulled up alongside each other, but Hamilton braked too late and he ran into the back of Raikkonen. Then Rosberg piled in, and he hit Hamilton. In the midst of all the chaos, Kubica found himself in the lead, which he converted into a magnificent win, at a circuit where he suffered a horrific crash 12 months previously. And he took the lead in the championship. Hamilton was given a 10-place grid penalty for the French Grand Prix for crashing into Raikkonen in Canada, which meant he started the race in 13th place, and his race was destroyed within a couple of corners. Trying to pass Sebastian Vettel at the Nürburgring chicane, he ran off the track, but chose not to yield the place back to the Toro Rosso driver. Within a few laps, he was issued with a drive-through penalty for gaining an illegal advantage. On lap 36, the leader Raikkonen's sector times began to fall off by a couple of tenths. This was the first sign of a problem with his car. Massa was able to take around a second per lap of him and drove past the Finn with little difficulty on lap 39, which he retained until the end of the race, bringing home a Ferrari 1-2, with Hamilton failing to score for the second race in the road. But 2 weeks later he won a thrilling British Grand Prix at Silverstone, as McLaren capitalized on a strategic blunder by Ferrari. The race started in damp conditions with Kovalainen and pole ahead of Mark Webber, but it was the second row of Raikkonen and Hamilton that made the best start. While Raikkonen was boxed in behind the front row man, Hamilton burst through to take the second after banging wheel with his teammate at the first corner. Hamilton kept up the pressure on Kovalainen and made his pass on lap 4, launching through at Stowe, leaving him unable to respond. By this time Massa had already 2 spins. When Hamilton and Raikkonen came in together on lap 21, the McLaren opted to change Hamilton's tyres, while the Ferrari did the opposite. But as rain began to fall heavily, it became clear that the McLaren had made the right decision. On the route lap, Hamilton was 1.1 seconds quicker in the second sector alone. Over the following laps, Hamilton streaked away. Raikkonen lost 5 seconds on lap 24 alone, and by lap 27 he was 22 seconds behind. By the halfway stage in the race, rain was falling very heavily, and it was starting to look as though extreme wet weather tyres would be necessary. Raikkonen finally gave up and pitted for fresh intermediate tyres on lap 30. As the weather got worse, more and more drivers were flying off the track. Even Hamilton went wide at Abbey. McLaren faced another strategical gamble when Hamilton came in for his second pit stop on lap 38. And again it looked as though they'd called it wrong, as they elected not to put him on extreme wet weather tyres, but gave him new intermediates instead. But as the rain eased over the coming laps, Hamilton was able to improve his lap time much more quickly than the rest of the field, up to 4 seconds per lap faster than the likes of his teammate and Raikkonen. Meanwhile, Massa was still struggling, and on lap 15 he spun for the 5th time. Hamilton won the race with over 60 seconds ahead of Barrichello and Heidfeld. It was the perfect response to growing criticism of his driving after the mistakes at Montreal and Magny-Cours. Hamilton, Massa and Raikkonen were tied up on 48 points, with 8 races to go. At the German Grand Prix starting from pole, Hamilton shot into an early lead, pulling out 1.8 seconds over Massa on the first lap alone. By lap 4 he had 3.7 seconds lead, 7 seconds by lap 10, and 11 by lap 18. In an effort to get on terms with Lewis, Ferrari switched Massa into the softer compound tyres at his first stop 2 laps after Hamilton. Massa's brief period in the lead allowed him to take a couple of seconds after Hamilton, and he was further ahead by Lewis getting stuck behind Trulli on his outlap before the Toyota pitted. But just as the German Grand Prix was starting to look settled, it took a sudden and dramatic twist. While Piquet was making his final stop, Glock's race came to an end in the barrier on the pit straight. He escaped injury in the crash, but the safety car was brought out while the debris were cleared up. With only 24 laps until the finish, anyone who still needed to pit could do so under the safety car and make it to the end of the race. Yet bluffingly McLaren chose not to pit Hamilton. Afterwards, Ron Dennis admitted they underestimated how long the safety car would stay out for, as the field reorganized itself while lap cars got their places back. But even so, it was a completely unnecessary gamble. When the race resumed on lap 42, Hamilton had 8 laps to build as large gap as possible. He pulled out 50.7 seconds over Massa before his final pit stop on lap 50. He came out 5th, behind Heidfeld, who still had to pit, Piquet, Massa and Kovalainen, who did not have to pit. Heikki wasted no time in letting his teammate pass. But when Hamilton caught Massa on lap 57, the Ferrari driver hardly made it any harder for Hamilton than Kovalainen had. Piquet was next in Hamilton's side, and on lap 59 he was dispensed with 2, having put up no more resistance than Massa had, but not really having a car to fend Hamilton off anyway. Hamilton clinched his 4th win of the season ahead of Piquet and Massa. At the Hungaroring, McLaren had the front row to themselves, but it was a Ferrari that reached the first corner first, Massa's. He outdragged Kovalainen and Hamilton before passing Lewis around the outside of the first corner, some payback for their brief encounter at Hockenheim. He eked out an advantage over Hamilton 10 by 10, until his lead reached 3 seconds by lap 17. On lap 41, Hamilton's front left tire deflated at the very first turn, forcing him to do an entire lap on a punctured tire, and then to do a 29-lap stint on the super soft tire they were trying to use as little as possible. He fell to 10th. Ferrari reacted by pitting Massa as soon as he could take enough fuel to reach to the end of the race. Kovalainen had been over 15 seconds behind and thus no longer a threat, or so it seemed. Massa was heading to a well-deserved win, but on lap 67 came a thunderbolt from a clear sky. With a sudden gush of smoke, his Ferrari was scorching to a halt in the pit straight. He retired from the lead with just 3 laps to go. The shock retirement handed the win to a surprise Kovalainen, his first and only victory. Hamilton finished 5th and went on the summer break with 5 points ahead of Raikkonen and 8 ahead of Massa. Felipe Massa is a hard man to beat from pole position, and so it proved it once again at the European Grand Prix. But when he came in for his pit stop on lap 37, it started to go wrong for Ferrari. Massa left his pit box as Adrian Sutil was passing by, and had to drive alongside the Force India as he headed toward the pit lane exit. The stewards announced they would decide whether he had been illegally released into the path of another car after the race, but he managed to escape penalty. Lewis Hamilton never managed to get on terms with the Ferrari driver, but second place meant he retained the lead in the Drivers' Championship. The Belgian Grand Prix began and ended on the wet track, but it was dry for the most part in between. Hamilton got a perfect start from his 11th career pole and cruised away from the chasing Ferraris. But at the start of the second lap he had a hard spin at the last source hairpin. If he hadn't pulled out such a large lead on the first tour, he'd been falling a long way back, but as it was, he was able to rejoin in second behind Raikkonen. During the race, Raikkonen held a 2 seconds lead over Hamilton, but as the rain began to fall lightly from lap 39, Hamilton began to reduce Raikkonen's lead. As lap 42 began, he cut 1.4 seconds out of Kimi's lead again, and they charged into the chicane side by side, Hamilton on the outside. Raikkonen, with Hamilton fully alongside him, pushed the McLaren clean off the track, putting Hamilton in the lead. Lewis dropped back and let Raikkonen repass him, but caught Kimi's slipstream and passed him again at La Source. But it still wasn't over. Halfway around lap 43, Hamilton had to dive off the track to avoid Nico Rosberg's Williams, which was rejoining the circuit. Raikkonen charged between the pair of them and took the lead again, but only for a few meters as he spun a few corners later. He then lost it again at the exit of Blanchimont and swept into the barriers. His race and title fight were over. By now it was raining heavily, but neither Hamilton nor Massa wanted to risk losing the lead by pitting for wet weather tires. They crawled around the final tour, taking over 2.5 minutes each. Sadly, the drama was not the end of the checker flag. The stewards determined after the race that Hamilton had gained an advantage by cutting the chicane while racing Raikkonen, and added 25 seconds to his race time, leaving him third behind Massa and Heidfeld, and his championship lead was reduced to only 2 points ahead of Massa. At the Italian Grand Prix, Sebastian Vettel led the field away from pole as the race began behind the safety car. Having started near the back, Raikkonen and Hamilton were queued behind Coulthard and Fisichella on a four-way battle for 11th. But DC quickly dropped behind the trio and Raikkonen began attacking Fisichella, finally passing the Force India on lap 8. Hamilton followed him the next time around. After a few laps, Hamilton was coming to life, and after picking off Fisichella, he quickly dispatched Raikkonen. He passed the car per lap from lap 14 to 16th, taking Nick Heidfeld, Timo Glock, and Robert Kubica to get into the top 8. On lap 27, Hamilton pitted and put up a new set of extreme wet tires. The forecast claimed heavier rain was on the way, but only a few drops arrived, not enough to keep life in the extreme wets. After his second pit stop, Hamilton didn't make too much progress and fell into the clutches of Mark Webber, who got a run at him, and the pair bang wheeled at the first chicane, Webber cutting the corner and rejoining the track behind Hamilton. Hamilton finished 7th behind Massa and held a 1-point lead over the Brazilian, where Sebastian Vettel became the youngest ever Formula 1 race winner. The 800th Formula 1 race saw Felipe Massa starting from pole ahead of Hamilton under the lights at the Singapore Grand Prix. Just like in Valencia, he seemed unbeatable, and by lap 9 he had a 3-second lead over Hamilton, with Raikkonen a further 4.3 behind. But Raikkonen's lap time started to improve, and he set a pair of fastest laps, cutting Hamilton's advantage to 2.3 seconds by lap 13. Meanwhile, Alonso, who along with Rosberg had started on the least favorable super soft tires, made his first pit stop. Although he fell to plumb last, it proved extraordinarily fortunate timing when his teammate crashed 2 laps later and the safety car was brought out. When the pit lane opened, most of the cars streamed in, including both Ferraris and McLarens. Felipe Massa was first into his pit box. When his Ferrari's unique gantry lights above the pit told him to leave, his fuel nozzle was still attached to his car. Massa took the fuel hose down to the pit lane, knocked one of his mechanics over and stopped before the exit. His remaining mechanics sprinted the entire length of their pit lane after the car, and after the few unsuccessful attempts managed to wrench the hose of the car. But his evening was ruined. He also got a penalty for unsafe release and finished the race in 13th place. Because he made his pit stop before the safety car, Alonso found himself in the lead and cruised to victory ahead of Rosberg and Hamilton, who extended his lead in the championship with 6 points. At the Japanese Grand Prix, Hamilton threw away his hard-earned pole the moment the lights went out as Raikkonen went past him. Not for the first time that season, Hamilton seemed to lose sight of the fact that his championship rival was Massa, not Raikkonen, and risked everything in a do-or-die move to recapture the lead. He dived for the inside, smoke pouring from log wheels, and ran wide, forcing Raikkonen to take evasive action. Hamilton made then a slow recovery and was passed by Kovalainen, Jarno Trulli, and the Ferraris. But on the second lap, he got a clear run up the inside of Massa at turn 10 and was through. Massa tried to come back at him at the following left-hander, but with 2 wheels on the curb and 2 wheels on the grass, he tipped Hamilton into a spin, and the McLaren driver found himself at the back of the field. The team responded by pitting Hamilton straight away to discharge his badly flat-spotted tires and inspect the damage from the collision with Massa, which included the barge boards and the part of the floor. When he returned to the track, he was 52 seconds from the lead. Within a few laps, Massa and Hamilton were hit with penalties. Hamilton for the turn 1 incident, Massa for hitting Hamilton. That sent the Brazilian plunging down the order from 6th to 14th, and cost Hamilton even more. Alonso took the flag ahead of Kubica and Raikkonen. Massa finished 6th, with Hamilton outside the points. At the Chinese Grand Prix, Hamilton found himself again on pole with Raikkonen alongside, but this time he got a better start and extended his lead lap by lap over the Ferraris. After the first pit stops, the Ferrari began maneuvering the drivers to get Massa into the second place he needed to minimize the damage in the championship to Hamilton. The problem was that Raikkonen had a 7 seconds advantage over Massa, which had been 8 seconds until he lost a lot of time lapping Giancarlo Fisichella. He also lost several seconds during his final pit stop, but still found himself over 2 seconds ahead of Massa. Over the following laps, the gap decreased, and finally Raikkonen slowed right down, and Massa took second. Hamilton, though, was dominant throughout the race. He won from pole and set fastest lap. Just as he did at Silverstone, he responded to criticism and pressure over the previous races with a very mature drive. But with Massa second and Raikkonen third, neither of the titles were decided yet. But Ferrari looked as comfortable at the top of the constructors' leaderboards as Hamilton did in the drivers. He went into Brazil just like a year earlier, with a 7-point lead. The Brazilian Grand Prix began and ended in unpredictable fashion. Rain fell 3 minutes before the intended start. Race control delayed the start for 10 minutes, while almost every driver switched from dry to intermediate tires. The top 4 got away cleanly. Felipe Massa held Jarno Trulli at bay at the first corner, and Heikki Kovalainen gained room to teammate Lewis Hamilton, allowing him to keep a hold on 4th. But behind the Finn, Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso attacked, dropping him to 7th. Nico Rosberg went deep into the first corner and slithered into the side of David Coulthard. It pushed the Red Bull driver into Rosberg's teammate Kazuki Nakajima, but although the Japanese driver was able to continue, Coulthard's final Grand Prix was over. The safety car came out, and after the pit lane opened, Giancarlo Fisichella gambled on an early switch to dry tires. It worked brilliantly, vaulting him up to 5th after everyone else had changed tires. Vettel and Alonso did so on lap 9, but Massa waited 1 lap later. This proved crucial, as Hamilton waited until Massa had pitted to react, shadowing his title rival's move. After the pit stops, Massa led the field from Vettel, Alonso, Raikkonen, Fisichella, Trulli and Hamilton. Lewis passed Trulli when the Italian went wide at turn 1, and now the McLaren driver found the 5th place he needed occupied by Fisichella. Hamilton bided his time as the track remained very slippery offline. Finally, on lap 17, he gingerly took the inside line away from Fisichella at the entry to the first chicane. He was back in 5th place, and the title was back within reach. On lap 36, Timo Glock pitted, but a sticky wheel nut cost him 5 crucial seconds. Massa pitted 2 laps later, and took off enough fuel to last him until the end of the race. Alonso and Hamilton pitted together on lap 40. Hamilton was so far behind that he only arrived in the pits as Alonso was departing. Vettel waited for the scheduled final pit stop until lap 51, and that dropped him from 2nd to 5th, behind Hamilton. As rain began to fall on lap 63, Massa led Alonso, Raikkonen and Hamilton. The McLaren driver had only 1 second advantage over the German, but he knew that even if he lost the place, he would still be champion. Alonso and Raikkonen pitted on lap 66. They were followed by Hamilton and Vettel. Massa was in on lap 67, with 4 remaining. Now everyone had pitted, except the 2 Toyotas, and this was crucial, because now Glock was ahead of Hamilton. After his early tire blunder, Kubica was fighting back, and on lap 69 he unlapped himself from Vettel. Then he did the same with Hamilton, forcing the McLaren wide. This was disastrous for Hamilton, as Vettel followed Kubica through to take 5th. Hamilton was now demoted to 6th, and his championship was again slipping away from him, just like a year earlier. Around the final 2 laps, Vettel's Toro Rosso was tantalizingly out of reach. On the McLaren radio, Martin Whitmarsh was telling Lewis to keep it cool, because Glock ahead was struggling on slick tires. By lap 71, the rain began to fall heavy, and Glock began to struggle even more. As Massa crossed the finish line, Hamilton was still 6th, which meant the Ferrari driver was champion. But 20 seconds later, Hamilton passed Glock on the last sector of the track and was promoted to 5th, which was all he needed to clinch the title. Massa could barely hold back his tears on the podium, but he was weeping with sadness, not joy. Neither his home victory nor Ferrari's 16th constructor title could ease the pain of having the Drivers' Championship torn from his grasp at the last gasp. But he sustained his losing with dignity. At 23 years, 9 months and 26 days, Hamilton became the youngest driver to win the World Championship. But the next 4 years brought little success to Hamilton, as the 2009 season saw the Brawn GP clinching both titles, and from 2010, Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel won pretty much everything. In these 4 years, Hamilton won 12 races, winning in Hungary and Singapore in 2009, Turkey, Canada and Belgium in 2010, China, Germany, Abu Dhabi in 2011, Canada, Hungary, Italy and Austin in 2012. In September that year, it was announced after much speculation that Hamilton would be leaving McLaren to join Mercedes for the 2013 season, replacing Michael Schumacher after signing a 3-year contract with the team. And what happened in the following years will be the topic of the second part.